Welcome to Generation Digital Workforce, the podcast that's here to explore the role of robotic process automation and other digital technologies. Whether you're just getting started or you're looking for advanced strategies and tactics, if you're curious about where human and digital workers are coming together to transform the future of work, then this podcast is for you. All right, let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us this week for Generation Digital Workforce. This is Zena coming at you from Austin, Texas. I'm really glad that you joined us today because I have Matt Parsons back with me, and he brought a friend, Mark Shivers, founder and CEO at Ignite IPA. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hey, great to be here.
For having us.
Awesome. So Matt, I'm going to turn this over to you as a kind of part two of your previous podcast. For the listeners out there who haven't listened to that, please do, along with this one. It is a great insight into the maturity curve of how you get started with intelligent automation. But Matt is here with Mark today to talk a little bit about the robotic operating model and then whatever else comes up along the way. So Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Zena. Mark, how's it going?
Not bad, man. How you doing?
Man, I think we're all doing the best we can in times like this with COVID and everything. But nothing kind of pulls me out of thinking about this type of stuff like digging into ROM. But definitely like talking shop, right? I definitely like talking shop with you though, Mark. And one of the things that Zena mentioned earlier is that you're currently founder of Ignite IPA and something you started up there. But, for the audience here, we'd love you to kind of get some background on, how did you even get to a place to start something like Ignite IPA and what is that? What is Ignite IPA and what do they do?
Yeah. So, let me take you back through my career history a little bit. I started as a pure play developer and then quickly was doing, proprietary development in all industries. I was in, everything from financial services, insurance, and I was actually in Beverly Hills, if you've ever watched the show Entourage, part of the development team in one of the real Ari Gold's first endeavors, building his relationship management systems out in Beverly Hills. So that was, interesting industry kind of developer career. I moved into the business, had a heavy focus in financial services, where I wound up at the Bank of New York Mellon. For those who don't know, it's about a 55,000 person organization that basically plays the back office function for, all securities movements and custodial banking requirements, loan processing, you name it in the financial services industry, they probably do it or have some role in it. And what I did there was I was in the business, leading re-engineering efforts across, shared services, operations, about 20,000 people for quite a while. And then went, kind of back to the technology realm in 2015, where we had this skunkworks project called robotic process automation. And, for anybody who knows the industry, that in 2015 we were, it was getting to become mainstream in financial services and a few other industries. But, a lot of the big software implementation firms didn't really know what they were doing. And there was not a lot of expertise, even within the vendors themselves. When I signed a contract, I think Blue Prism was 30 people deep, right? 2015, that was a while ago in the history of Blue Prism. So, there wasn't a lot of people doing this. So we were kind of making it up as we went and, learning on the go, learning through experience. And we built a program there that was, 1,000 licensed, 500 plus bots, in production and, saving quite a bit of money, not only from an operations perspective, but creating revenue through bots there. So we got a lot of notoriety in the industry. And I helped a lot of other companies build their centers of excellence from within the Bank of New York Mellon. And I've gotten so many requests while I was leading that charge to help them do what we did at the bank, not only do, Blue Prism, but build what we called an intelligent process automation center of excellence that married a whole bunch of different technology like optical character recognition, machine learning, workflow, and a bunch of the other technologies that are, the underpinnings of what we call intelligent process automation. We were getting calls to say, how'd you do it? Can you show me the basics? Can you help me with the operating model? What made you successful? How did you scale? And I just said, look, I think I could do this on my own. So we broke away about, maybe a year and a half ago. And we've been helping clients at Ignite IPA in, a bunch of industries like media, higher education, obviously financial services and insurance. And the list goes on. So we've taken the show on the road, so to speak, and having quite a bit of success, kind of helping people do what we did at the Bank of New York Mellon and really expanding the scale of their programs.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I was looking at some of the details that I think we've talked about in the past, and when you have over 5.1 million robotic processes, and then you process more than 60 million different items, you're in the big leagues, and I think that the people who latched on to you early on and wanted that early success, I'm glad they did, because, you've definitely been helpful for me to learn a lot more, that's for sure. And I hope others will want to jump on that bandwagon too. But, I think, with this, us kind of wanting to dig into ROM and everything, I'd really like to understand, what do you think are the key things people should focus on, because I think we hear way too often about organizations failing or, just, not ever even really getting off the ground with automating. Why was your time at BNY different? And, what do you think the ROM was really a key to that?
I think the first conversation we had was, how do I control this thing, right? And it was really, we were afraid of the technology, which almost got us to ask the right questions early on. And it was more fear that brought us there. People now are a little too overconfident with the way they approach, robotics, and saying, I'll do this on my own, don't worry, it's simple, it's easy. And it is simple and it is easy, but the more you invest in controlling it, the more likely you're going to scale this thing to heights beyond what most of your competitors are doing, right? So for us, I think the playbook that you guys came with, albeit it was 2015 and you guys have enhanced that quite a bit, and I got to give myself a little pat on the shoulder. That was probably part of the ROM development early on. And it was a fun process working with you guys in 30-person shop. I think you guys have enhanced it so much that for me at the time, buying your ROM was just as important, or buying a vendor with the ROM concept was just as important as actually buying the robotics technology itself. Right? So, I would just encourage everybody to not only understand the ROM, but make sure that you focus on the operating model and the governance of it just as much as you focus on learning the technology. And, Matt, like we talk about it all the time, right? ROM is a lot of things to a lot of people, and you could really, it get overwhelmed, right? So many people get into what you guys consider the robotic operating model, and they're like, where do I start even with the operating model, right? So, I don't know. I get asked all the time, what are the three things that people really have to focus on, right? And for me, it's the solution engineering and the pipeline. So, Matt, how many times do you get into a client and they're like stuck at, a handful of bots, and when you ask them, like, you're really excited, like, what'd you save? Because you know that they can save a lot, or, how much are these bots helping people? And the conversation falls flat, right? It's because they haven't invested in the right, prioritization or pipeline development. They don't have people who understand what good looks like, and they pigeonhole what robotics can do, right? I just see that all the time, and I think that you guys crystallizing that piece in your ROM, is huge.
I couldn't agree more, and some of the things I see, to your point exactly is I can't tell you how many times I've been on that conversation, or an organization wants to do a pilot and they just have no plans after that pilot. They don't have any governance or controls. They haven't really thought about infrastructure, or even best practices. I've seen some of the pilot processes I've seen automated, it makes you, you're going to have nightmares at night because, at any moment that process is going to break and you have to rebuild the whole thing. So, I definitely think that organizations who aren't taking it seriously up front are literally just wasting money. I mean, it is a pure waste of time, effort, money if you aren't approaching, the governance and control right up front. If you aren't thinking about best practices, if you're not thinking about infrastructure, if you're not thinking about, a different way to do business. So, what are some of the challenges maybe that you see, with it? Implementing this, because I think of infrastructure, I think of all the security, pushback that you get because security guys know everything, and, or governance and control. A lot of that can be muted by not having the right executive sponsorship. So I don't know, where are you seeing a lot of things holding organizations up in ROM?
Well, just back to the point about the solution engineering and pipeline prioritization, I think that before you even get into those issues, what we're finding is the sale for robotics is so easy if you actually come with a pipeline, right? And people are looking to, pilot something and then, move their way through the pilot process and then make a broader decision. But, look, the technology is proven. You're not proving anything now if you're the 15th client in the industry using this technology. It works, right? Everybody should understand that. What we're having success with is actually going in and just looking at automation opportunities in general. And generally, when we find like a pipeline of opportunities, what underpins all of these things is a need for enabling technology like robotics that integrate systems together. So I think it's like chicken before the egg, where they start with the pilot and they move to prioritization. It should be start with the opportunities, right, and then move to the purchase, then move to the pilot. And then, after that, to your point, we see a lot of people underinvesting in that aspect of control and infrastructure, right? And there's a lot of things that actually have to happen. You could do it on your own with like 5 bots. But what happens when you get past 5 or 10 bots, right? Things like caching issues start to come into play. Things like, you might be auditing every field underneath the sun because it was just easy to set up. But that, in a high volume, high transaction process, you might be, churning through your memory, your space on the servers, right? And then all of a sudden you have bot issues. Well, with experience, those things are very easily kind of taken care of and mitigated. Whereas, why make this stuff up again when others have kind of come before you and solved those problems and really have best practices from infrastructure and control perspective? And if you do it right, you're going to set yourself up for that 100-bot infrastructure, that 1,000-bot infrastructure, right? And the concept I always say is, why have infrastructure be the thing that prevents you from scaling, right? That's probably the thing you want to make sure you have a sound investment in early on, so that you can take this robotics workforce to where it should be in your company.
No, I totally agree. And on my podcast with Dina a few weeks ago, I said the same thing. I said that, I would argue that, why would any organization make a decision to do this if they didn't understand their automation potential? Why would you invest any effort into, aligning strategy and pouring resources to develop a brand new capability that's going to need unique controls that are different from things you've done previously? And it's going to, kind of marry IT and business together to some extent. So, I totally agree. And I think it's probably one of the number one areas that, we probably hear from customers even after they feel like they've done an initial good process pipeline build and review. They come back and they say, well, we just can't find any more processes, and I really find out is that they just didn't look for those processes because they're there. And, it's not always the case, but I think what are some of the things that clients who say, I don't even know where to start. How do I start with this? What are ways for them to, identify that automation potential so that they can make a strategic decision for this? Because it seems like it's a bottleneck for a lot of companies.
Yeah, it is. The funny part is I think that luck was on my side when I was starting my career. So, when I said before, I was kind of part of the dark side in the business, right? When you talk technologists, right? Moving into the business is like going to the dark side, right? But I think because I have experience as a developer and then moved into the business and understood, kind of the issues on both sides when you're a technology manager and you're a business manager, I'm uniquely positioned, and, as well as my staff who kind of came along that journey with me, we're kind of uniquely positioned to identify opportunities and then create a business case or a business plan for automation in general. It really doesn't matter the solution, right? And we come into it without blinders on. We don't say, hey, we're a hammer looking for a nail, and we have robotics, so everything we look for has got to fit the robotics angle. We come in broad brush and say, look, where are you most manual? We do a situational analysis, and we create this operational or this automation opportunity heat map so that, you understand basically where you're going before you ever, start putting a line of code in place to solve the problem. Because it's important to have your North Star, your end point, so that you are all marching towards the same direction before you just say, hey, let's just throw a couple $1,000 at the wall and see if this robotics thing works, right? That doesn't really work out for too many clients. You have to know why you're getting involved. You have to have buy-in from the business, right, and the technology team. And most of the time, if you have a pipeline of opportunities, that internal sale, because it's really more of an internal sales process, that internal sale becomes so much easier. And really, that just comes with experience. Like if you don't know what like a technology like RPA or Blue Prism can do, if you look at a process, you're not going to be able to identify it, right? Which is why I think, for that component of your operating model, experience, like training wheels, to teach you what good looks like and to go through that first implementation, right? And then, get everybody nodding in the same direction and say, yes, it's feasible with RPA, and yes, it's feasible from a business perspective, meaning it has financial value to it, we should do it. One of the things I say with this new technology is, just because you can automate something doesn't mean you should. And just because you can doesn't mean you should kind of applies here. So paying attention to saying no to opportunities is just as important as finding the big boys, right? Matt, you and I talk about it all the time, right? If you wind up just implementing everything for the sake of the fact that you have this RPA software in-house, and you're implementing, 10 minutes of Sally's job a day, right? But it takes a developer 3 months to do. It's probably not the right opportunity. But early on, you're not skilled enough to identify that issue in your pipeline, right? On the other side of it, do you really know when you walk through an operational process that you can take 4 pieces out of an end-to-end workflow and put a bot in place and save 90% of that end-to-end workflow for simple, implementable, and, feasible automation opportunities? A lot of people struggle with that as well. So experience is definitely a big part in the opportunity identification.
It sounds like the less experience you have up front and the more you kind of try to do it through your chair, it sounds like you're just inevitably going to create more technical debt than anything else.
Yeah, I love that word. Yep, exactly. That's something that I learned from you. It's a concept that we talk about at Ignite IPA all the time. This tool is so powerful, and that's the cool part about it. You can do almost anything with robotic process automation. And then I say this, that with great power comes great responsibility. It's the responsibility to kind of control, what we're developing. We talk about the technical debt all the time, and this is what I'm afraid of when I start off a new client engagement. They're like, I just want to do it on my own. Just sell me the licenses. Now, for me, that's think about it. It's like a golden goose. You just want to buy licenses and, have me walk away, go knock yourself out. I don't have to invest my time in that. Great. My whole point is to make clients self-sufficient. That's our whole operating model. At the Bank of New York, when I was leading that charge, I would have loved the consultant to come in and say, I don't want to dump 15 junior resources in your shop and have them learn on my dime. I want experience to come in, like training wheels, have you rolling, right? The analogy we use is like a rocket ship, right? You need all this heavy weight, investment up front. You need the fuel to ignite, get you off the ground. It's a really big process. And then just once I'm in orbit and I'm kind of floating, just kind of fall away, right? Just have the consultants just fall away. It's the analogy we're kind of using in the industry to describe what we want to do for clients to make them self-sufficient. And, it's very important to have that experience up front, a consultant that wants you to be, self-sufficient, and then just kind of fades into the background once you are. But in a technical debt discussion, if you don't have that experience, you're kind of fumbling through the process. And what happens is when you build a solution, you're building them without standards. And what I find is developers are creative by nature. That's why we love them. They're developers. They want to be creative in terms of the way they produce a solution. But what Blue Prism allows you to do is it allows you to use the technology to be creative to solve a business problem. You don't actually want a developer being creative in terms of how they use the tool, how they interact with systems. That should be standard so that if there's any changes in the operating model or the systems you're interacting with, anybody can pick up the code, jump in, make a small tweak, and have that change propagate to all the downstream processes. The reason I love Blue Prism is it's object-oriented, right? If you make a change to the interaction with a system in one of the objects, it propagates to all the processes downstream, right? But you need best practices to ensure people are using the tool the right way. And that comes with experience. And if you don't do that, the technical debt example comes in, where you're building all these bespoke solutions, interacting with the same systems, just in slightly different ways. And if you don't apply that reusable concept, right, best practices, and have kind of a governing body over the top of that, you might be creating more technical debt than it's worth.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And when you look back at your time at BNY, it sounds like that's really, crafted or molded, your vision for how you kind of want clients to see it. I guess, what were some of the biggest ways that it changed, obviously other than these people in the marketplace coming to BNY and you and saying, hey, help us, show us how to do this. But, how did, your team come in and look at things initially? Because it sounds like you had the right mentality for it, but what were the growing pains like?
Yeah, we did. I think we had the right mentality, but, what you think is going to happen and what actually happens are always two different things, right? So we had our fair share of mistakes, trust me. Like, we stepped on landmines as we were walking through the robotic operating model as it was being kind of crystallized at the same time we were taking off, with our journey. And we struggled even for 6 months getting a bot ID access to our system. And that's something people still struggle with, to be honest with you. I mean, there's ways around that, and there's practices, but, things like that, we struggle with early on. I would say I'll give you an example. So big bank has a ton of mainframe systems. And the way you interact with the mainframe is through an emulator. It's like a screen into the back end of a big mainframe system. And, there's different emulators. And we didn't realize that clients in the organization doing the same processes were just using different emulators or different windows into these systems. So we've created an interaction with the same system, but through one window, and then the same system through another window, because we just didn't know better. We didn't know that we should be analyzing how clients are interacting with a system and then standardizing the way our robots interact, not just automating what our clients were telling us, not just take blindly the requirements for how we interact with the system and then have the robot do the exact same thing. It didn't make sense, and it added, to the point before, it added technical debt. So, we built a lot of technical debt to the point where year 2 was a rip and replace. We started ripping out projects that we had implemented early on and then replaced them with more standardized processes that met our new best practices. And if I could go back in time, I would have put all of these best practices built up front, but, I didn't have that in 2015. Now you have, a lot of software implementation vendors that have their own out-of-the-box best practices. I'd argue that we have, some of the better ones, but to be honest with you, you need the concept of best practices. And I actually think that you guys crystallized the design authority concept into your robotic operating model on the heels of our engagement with you guys, right?
We did. I remember speaking with Jet, who was helping lead that team, and he's now at Blue Prism. But one of the big conversations we had around it was design authority. When I asked him, kind of what's next with ROM, and I think this was even before he was at Blue Prism, and he was telling me that the one thing we don't have is a design authority, and I still find that that's not leveraged or utilized in organizations until they've either reached a level of technical debt that it shows the value of the platform, but they just rolled it out poorly in a way that, hey guys, you got to fix this or we got to figure something else out. Or, they just never really bought into it, never really added that extra level of control and governance to identifying these processes and saying no to automations, So I think that's a really big one. So thank you, obviously, for helping identify that, because I still tell clients today, and that one of the things we ask, well, who's responsible for the design authority? And most are like, design what? So. Yeah.
Developers are confident at their core, right? Why do I need someone governing the way I do things? And that's, with your standard Java, .NET developers, you're going to get somebody to push back on standards, right? Because they should be creative in the way they use their script coding, but it's just a little different. And that's, I think, why sometimes some developers struggle with that, and just they're overly creative with the way they use the technology. And that's really kind of against, the best practices in Blue Prism. And that's, it's part of the root cause as to why the design authority has so much pushback. But, if you can get over that hump, you really eliminate a lot of the technical debt that could be created.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So on that note, are there any highlights that you have for us on, some of the cool things that you've done for some clients with Ignite IPA and taking all that experience that you got from BNY?
Yeah, we just talked to a large company on the West Coast with a pretty big call center, and back to the opportunity identification period. What we did was they were trying to do a pilot, and we kind of turned them off of a pilot and said, why don't we do a pilot by analyzing your operations first and looking at where this pilot should be. But we went so deep with that pilot opportunity that we identified close to $3 million in savings for this client. Lo and behold, probably got hit pretty hard with this new coronavirus, COVID-19 lifestyle that we're now dealing with, trying to stay at home, and the industry kind of took a hit. And, they are completely grateful that, they decided to take a look at their operations and, start to invest in automation because, they're going to have a very big increase in the number of calls, the call volume, and the complexity of some of these calls, and they need their people focused on that. So they've got bots and people kind of now working in tandem to try to, get through the mundane, repetitive requests from clients and automate those while turning their kind of white glove service on to this new experience. Otherwise they probably would have had to double their staff just to handle what we consider a cost center, right? Call center is a cost center. And it's a revenue producing call center from upsell and cross sell, but the way they looked at it, it was mostly a cost center, right? So solving client problems once they made the sale. So, that's one. Another area, is really looking at, we've been helping a lot of clients in the finance division doing, quite a bit of like accounts payable, accounts receivable functions where there's, multiple systems that people have to update, constantly. And, it really just doesn't make any sense to have a person in the middle of a technology that we just, we can't get an integration to. In that case, bots are, a great, what we call a stractical solution. And, Jet and I coined that term a long time ago, part strategic, part tactical, right? So it's a term that kind of fits well with robotics, right? You start off saying, yeah, it'll be a tactical solution, but it's such a good, robust solution that it eventually just becomes strategic, right? Any tactical solution that sits in an operation for 4 years is probably the strategic one, right? So however you define it early on doesn't really matter. So, there's some consistency and there's some nuances to how we're using robotics in different clients. But one of the cool things we're doing right now is there's a lot of clients that have invested pretty heavily in workflow or are investing right now in workflow. And workflow kind of takes you from point A to point B in terms of managing the end-to-end process. And we're finding a lot of clients having success marrying their robotics workforce with their workflow investment to handle the simple tasks like the data enrichment. So if you have, let's say, case management for, a credit card company, you have a statement request, right? Well, you might just get a request for account number, whatever, or credit card number, whatever, or the borrower name. And you have to then go out to your institutional systems and pull down information to find out entitlement, to validate the person who sends you the email for the statement request, right? You're doing data enrichment, data validation. To then make the decision, or from a statement request perspective, then just automate that downstream process. Pull the email from a downstream system after validated, pull the statement down, and then send the statement out, right? That's a simple use case, but it kind of shows how, you can leverage either, an end-to-end process with workflow, integrate robotics, and then get a big savings. Because if you can imagine that, before you have robotics, you have a person going upstream to 2 or 3 systems to do the validations and entitlements and to pull the client information. And then you have that person or another person in the operations group going out to multiple systems and pulling down one or multiple statements, packaging it up and sending it out to the client, right? Kind of a non-value added activity, even if you've invested heavily in workflow, right? So now you've managed this process. You've got it tracked. People have accounts and they're leveraging their work queues correctly, but it's still manual, right? So, that marriage of kind of workflow and robotics, it seems to be a really cool, neat way that clients are kind of adopting this RPA technology.
Yeah, I totally agree. We've got a lot of clients who, just didn't realize how, complementary those technologies are to each other because, you can kind of get into the weeds and, there's some things you can do with BPM that you can also do with the workflow with RPA. But, one of the better things that I've seen is that our RPA brings a lot more value to the workflow, like you mentioned, because so many of the applications that workflow wants to interact with within the side of the enterprise, I think on average, 90% of the applications that exist don't even have APIs. And with most workflows, you're kind of dead in the water if you wanted to interact with that application. But now you have RPA, and now all of a sudden those applications can be exposed as web services. And so now you can incorporate them in your workflow and have a more dynamic process internally. So I think the value there is tremendous. It's been a shame that we have, at least in my opinion, that we haven't seen more organizations really just highlighting this fact. So I'm happy to see that that's something that, Ignite's been targeting and helping clients understand more, because we definitely need more of that in the marketplace.
It's the whole intelligent process automation suite, right? It's the concept that any one technology usually can't solve a client's problems. And it's the myriad of those technology concepts married together in this cohesive ecosystem that'll really, accomplish the end goals, right? You have a tool that could manage the work, another tool that could actually bring the automations, the simple automations, or more complex end-to-end automations. You have your OCR technology that can extract data from documents, and some machine learning that makes the process not a heavyweight, training process, both from bots and from OCR and from workflow. You marry all those things together, and there's not a lot of problems you can't solve with that myriad of technology. What a lot of clients do, though, is they pick one and they say, this is my silver bullet, right? They hit a wall, and then they blame the technology. But it's not really the technology. It's the architecture of these concepts together and understanding really what you need, versus just saying, hey, my colleague has, workflow and I need workflow. You might not. You might just need a pure play RPA solution, or vice versa. It's really understanding that problem first, though.
No, I totally agree. And so before I kind of wrap this up and pass it back to Zena, who I know has a question or two maybe for you, if you could just quickly highlight, we talked about kind of, ROM has 7 core pillars, and, you could spend 2 hours doing a deep dive presentation into every single slide or book about it, and you probably still would miss a lot of important key aspects. But you mentioned 3 aspects that really you have to just hammer on and have, and you just got to be relentlessly focused, I think, in ensuring that you have control of those things. And I believe it was control and governance, your best practices and infrastructure. Correct me if I'm wrong. Roughly, those 3 are really the most important. Is that right?
I would say solution engineering and your pipeline prioritization and governance. I think it's your design authority and best practices for your developers to standardize and prevent from technical debt. And then your infrastructure engineer and your control manager, to make sure that you're set up right for scale. I think those 3 are the most important investments early on, not only from an experience perspective to get you on the right path, but really to make sure that you have the idea behind those 3 roles in your operating model if you really want to scale this thing.
Yeah, and I think the most important message from all of that, at least in my eyes, is that the true value of having someone who's experienced and delivered this and has gone through all the pain of creating an operating model internally for a company and has successfully helped the company scale. To me, I think they're more valuable than any book you could read, any article, any video you can watch, because, that experience to me just can't be replicated really in any other way. So, I think the people who are listening to this, really should take the time to, even if they feel like they didn't get enough, to reach out to you and make sure that they understand, just how important these things are. And I think the other thing too is that people just need to be prepared to make mistakes and to move quickly. I don't know how much, I think that's an important aspect of the ROM in my eyes, is that nothing's going to be perfect. And if you're not ready to make mistakes and quickly, shift and do things, with more agility, then, you're probably in the wrong space anyways. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I think that's an important aspect you need to have when you think about ROM.
No, I can't agree more with you. I think a little bit of investment up front, can set you on your way to self-sufficiency. Look, I did it when I was sitting in the client's shoes with a little bit of probably, made more mistakes than I wish I would have early on, but we learned from those mistakes. And I would say, yes, you should make mistakes, but, you don't have to make as many as those did when they started the program in 2015, 2016, 2017. If you've got a year or 2 under your belt, you can't find your way around, you're trying to figure out, why has other companies had so much success and why am I struggling? You just ask. You might need a little injection, right? A little spark in your operating model that could help you with your priorities, maybe refine your best practices so that you don't create so much technical debt and spin your wheels fixing what you developed, and you're on your way. I would also say, though, Matt, you should be self-sufficient in this. And, here's where I kind of almost kill my own business model. But, companies can learn this thing. Companies can be self-sufficient in this. But I wouldn't start there. I wouldn't start trying to go at it on your own, because you're going to wind up spending more money than you have to in the long run, rather than just, having someone with experience, come in, be your training wheels, and then leave.
No, I totally agree. And I think, I think it kind of breaks my heart a little bit when I see people who are really, really technical and know how to handle this technology, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to pick it up quickly. There's just so many moving pieces that when they feel like they can do this on their own, or they can learn everything they need to know about whether they're picking the right partner technology with a 2-day POC or something like that, it kind of breaks my heart, because I think the way that people have purchased technology and gone about it for so long, this is totally different. It's not just the technology; it really is changing the way that you implement, the way you run security controls. It will eventually change the culture of your employees in a different way. That it'll be different type of work that they're doing. So there's just so much more to take into consideration if you want to do this big than just being good at technology.
Yeah, I agree. What burns me up is there's this new trend in the industry called citizen developer, right? And it's just, I think, a cool buzzword that a lot of technologists are throwing around there. And I think it's a cool idea, right? That everybody is becoming more technical in all industries, right? I mean, you have, the millennial generation graduating college with finance degrees who could, spin up some pretty cool automations in Microsoft products, right? So it's pretty cool. Like, it's creating the macros all over the place. And it's cool that we're becoming a more technical workforce. But the citizen developer concept is, in my mind, kind of counter to what we're trying to do with robotics in terms of standardizing the operating model, making sure that people don't run off and just develop a solution and then, there's no standards applied to it, or you can't track what they're actually doing with that. So you're creating so much technical debt by giving the tool to somebody, a very powerful tool, right? But then having to maintain that when there was no value in doing the work in the first place, automating the work in the first place, not respecting the fact that anything you automate kind of has a cost to it long term, right? So you shouldn't just automate for the sake of automation. I mean, that concept, I think, is also one that I'm trying to educate people on in the industry, and making sure that, yes, you can get there. But generally, citizen developer is not where you start, right? You start with a controlled governance model, making sure you as a company learn this new technology, and then you systematically hand it to the masses, right? Starting with kind of a centralized center of excellence, moving to a centralized but federated governance model in each line of business, and then start to go more federated as you get more mature. But those companies that are really just like, I'm going to give this technology to the masses, I find they have no way of tracking the benefits, and largely because, they're automating processes that probably shouldn't be automated in the first place. And on top of that, the technical debt they're creating is really causing them pain, giving the industry of robotics a bad name, when it's really the implementation of the robotic software that's causing it.
Totally agree. I definitely haven't been able to describe it that eloquent. Normally my analogy is, think RPA really done right, it's meant for the enterprise, and even small and medium businesses can really get a tremendous value out of it. But, citizen developer, in my eyes, I think it has its value. And that value to me is typically if you're running your home business out of your garage and you need to automate some spreadsheets or some other, some emailing and work, then I think it could be really valuable for you. But, as soon as you want to reach scale, to your point, you lose a lot of the control, which I think more than anything is something you've got to have full dedication to be successful with RPA.
Yeah, amen.
But yeah, well, man, I really enjoyed this conversation. We could probably go on for hours talking about this stuff, just because it's what what makes us tick right now.
No, I can nerd out over ROM all day long.
It's been great listening to you guys talk shop. I do have one question for you, Mark, because earlier you said something that rung true for me, and I've heard other customers say, and that is that, this technology is proven. If there's a business out there who's like thinking they need to run a pilot, well, that's a little crazy because the technology is proven. And I've heard other customers who've been doing this as long as you have say that same thing. But for someone out there who's not been doing this for, 5, 8 years, however long it's been now, and they're trying to convince their business leaders that they don't need to do a pilot or a proof of concept because the technology is proven. What advice or what can you tell them to help them convince their company that they need to, or that they don't need to do that, I should say?
Yeah, it's a great, I mean, look, we all have a sales role, right? Like I run a consulting organization and I have a sales role. You know, just like the head of a new RPA Center of Excellence has a sales role, just like the enterprise architect trying to bring RPA in has a sales role. It's just a different audience. So they're usually trying to sell to your senior executives, your CFO on, you know, the benefits financially of the investment. And then you're trying to sell the business internally that you're selling it to that they can use this technology, right? So what we've done is we say, we understand you guys need to be educated. We have at Ignite IPA, we have a 2-day working session that day one focuses on your pipeline identification. And it's really just kind of a working session, getting the meetings of the minds together with some subject matter expertise, doing some demos of processes and understanding, you know, where automation or RPA would be feasible in your organization to create that pseudo pipeline. The second day is focused on refining that pipeline slightly, but then in that list of activities, picking 1 or 2 of those opportunities, and in 2 hours or less, we can spin up a demo interacting with your applications as a client, and that's usually enough to sell. So it's a recorded demo that we hand to the prospective client, and it fast forwards through that we need a pilot, we need to understand the technology for 3 months, and then we drown in analysis paralysis. So it's worked, you know, at a number of companies to date, and it fast forwards that internal sales process, you know, quite a bit. Because if you see financial value and you see it working against your systems, it's the concept of seeing is believing. You don't need it installed and running in production and, you know, and going through the steps over and over and over again for 3 months. You know, that's not a pilot, right? That's not a proof of concept. And you don't really need that to begin with. It really just wastes time. And I'll be honest with you, I had a client that took that approach in February that wanted the pilot as opposed to the 2-day working session. We got through their pilot and we actually finished it about, I'd say, end of February. On the day that we locked down, I was actually on the client site, flying home, thinking that's probably it for us, right? The world has just changed, and there's no way these guys are gonna buy, you know, robotics technology. And lo and behold, they didn't. And if they would have bought in February, they would have been way more prepared to handle this onslaught of volume that they were trying to bring robotics in to help. And now they're kind of stuck in a, hey, let's stop spending. We don't know what the new normal looks like kind of, you know, mentality. And the project sponsor kicks himself every day when I talk to him and I say, hey, you know, what's your CFO thinking now? And he's like, I should have just bought the damn thing. I should have just bought the licenses. I should have listened to the 2-day process.
Listen to Mark in all his wisdom. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing just now. So I think that's good advice, though. I think even just approaching it as if you are trying to sell something internally is good advice, too. So I could obviously, as well as Matt, keep talking about this and asking you a lot more questions. One of the things that just came to my mind as you were talking there about the customer to not be named is, you know, it's come up on several of my other podcasts here recently around this idea of onshore, offshore, and digital workforce, and how that giving you that tripod, if you will, and how those businesses that don't have that digital workforce as that third leg of the stand are really falling down right now in their ability to keep up with those who have already plugged that third leg in. So if you're so inclined, I'd love to have you back on the podcast and we can talk a little bit more about, you know, how having that digital workforce really does create a competitive advantage for businesses and how it does. Would you be interested?
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy to do that. Yep. I mean, robots don't get sick, right? They don't get COVID, and they work from wherever you want. So it's definitely you know, an interesting topic. More than happy.
They don't get sick, although I have heard that, you know, they do need maintenance and care and feeding. And that, you know, one of the interesting things that one of my other guests brought up is that, you know, digital workers need managers. And I have to say, for a moment, that was kind of blew my mind a bit. But when you actually think about what that means, it makes sense. So I'd love to have you back on in, you know, a couple weeks, a month or now from now, and explore some of those topics a little more.
Yeah,
but right fun. Now, Awesome. Well, what I'd like to do right now is ask you my favorite question of my entire every episode, and that is what I like to call my Xena Zinger. So, as I was listening today, you said something that gave me my idea for what I was going to ask today, and that is you said, with great power comes great responsibility. So here's my question. If a digital worker had a superpower, what would their superpower be and why?
That's a great question. I mean, I would say omni-knowledge. I guess all-knowing. So what I always like to say is you have a digital worker that's kind of like, maybe it's a bad example, kind of like Rain Man, right? Where they can just absorb so much information. They can take anything that, let's say in financial services, as an example, a reconciliation expert, an income processing expert, a loan expert, and a fund accountant can understand. And you can bake that into the robotics memory, right? And then they can switch jobs as new volume comes in, depending on what's in their work queue, right? So I would say it's just kind of like an all-knowing superpower. It can't think creatively. It's just trained to do what it's told, but there's no end to what you can train, a single robot to do.
Kind of like a Dr. Manhattan plugin.
There you go.
I love it. This has been so much fun today. Matt, Mark, thank you so much for joining us. And to all my listeners out there, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Nina. Thanks, Matt.
Nina.
You've been listening to Generation Digital Workforce. If you want to hear more about RPA, AI, and other cognitive technologies that are shaping the future of work, join us next time as we continue to go deeper on these topics with industry innovators and experts. To make sure you never miss a future episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. And if you've liked what you heard today, please leave us a review. It's one of the best ways to help more people find valuable content. For show notes and more info, visit us at blueprism.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.